So the fastest I've driven was with my ex-girlfriend. This is a long time ago. Her dad works for BMW, or used to. And when you work at BMW, you get prototype cars. And we had a BMW prototype 7. Sorry, it's German. I speak a little German. And the fastest I've gone in a car on a street, the Autobahn, was 260 kilometers an hour, which is, it's scary fast. So let's get started. So I love coming to Asia, because I've only been here less than 4 times in Asia my whole life. So every time I come here, typically, right now I live in Germany. And when you go to, has anybody ever been to Germany? A few of you guys, right? Oh, it's okay. But if you're Asian and if you've been to Germany, it's a different perspective on life. So when you ride the subway here, you're about average, or I'm about average height. In Germany, you're looking up the whole time. It's a different perspective. And I think it's super important that you change your perspective, because that's how you come up with new ideas. How many can identify with this sentiment here? You know, the internet, we love the internet. Can we turn the sound up for this next slide? Let me reiterate that. How many can identify with this one? It's actually supposed to be Whitney Houston playing. No, you can't. That was the tail end of it. We'll try that again, one more time. It's not the same without Whitney. Whitney's not coming. Oh, it's okay. But anyway, it's Whitney from The Bodyguard. And I think what's amazing now with the internet is we almost have all the connections we could ever want, ever, at the moment. And what that means is, if you think about answers, we have all the answers in our fingertips on our mobile phones. So answers we get everywhere through Google. And do you guys have Amazon Echo over here? The Amazon device where you speak to it? Some of you do. So what's interesting also, you don't have to type anymore. You can just speak and you get an answer. So I think in a world when answers are limitless, facts become commodities. Look at the election in the US. The facts are commodities. They aren't real anymore. It doesn't really matter. And what that means is, it's not the answers that matter anymore. It's the questions. I think questions matter more than ever. And I think we tend to forget that when we get older. So this is my whole premise, basically. When I work with companies like BMW or Adidas or whatever it might be, they always talk about the technology element. And tech is hard for them. But even harder than technology for any company are the people that work within the company. And it's people that are working there and they don't question why they do things. And we heard that a little bit this morning. You know, like the stand-up comedian. He was talking about, you know, he did things and he just didn't feel right about it or whatever it might be. And it's because we stopped questioning why we do things. And I think that's why most companies are failing today, because they don't question why they do things. They just do them because they've always done them that way. And I think that makes it really hard to move forward. And I think great companies understand you have to question things if you want to move forward. So what happens is people don't question because whatever cases. But I think the best point, or the best people to actually question things are maybe not grown-ups, but kids. And you know, we have some of Zhang's kids here. And how many of you have children? Anyone have children in the audience? A few. Okay, that's okay, because we all used to be children, so we can all relate to that, right? And if you remember what it was like to be a child, you're growing up, your world is constantly changing, and you're always asking questions like, why is the sky blue? How are people made? Why do you have to go to work? Or why do you have to go to Hong Kong? All these questions. And when we get older, we forget to question things. So just an example. Let me go back one. This is a picture of my 2 boys. I have 2 kids, two guys, Ellis and Nilo. And they always question things. We build things together. And like most kids their age, they really love dinosaurs. You know, they're really into dinosaurs. And I think a lot of kids are into dinosaurs. But most recently, the eldest, my eldest son, Ellis, he read that dinosaurs actually had feathers on them. You know, it's not what they saw in the books. They were related to chickens, basically. And that's what this says here. They're not just characteristics of birds, but of dinosaurs as well. So he read that and he thought, oh no. You know, he said, hey, Papa, hey, Dad, we have to go home and throw away all of our books because they're not true anymore. The information is not true. And that's kind of how our world is today. Things are happening so quickly, and things are changing so quickly that it's really hard to understand what is true and what's not true. And what that means is when the world is always changing, we as people have to always be learning. And I think great companies understand that fundamentally, if the world is always changing, they have to have a culture where it's always about learning. And a lot of times we forget that. It's learning and questioning. And actually, we have to unlearn a lot of things too. So how do you do that? You have to actually, that's even harder. So if you've ever ridden a bike, try riding a bike a different way. Or if you skateboard or snowboard or drive a car, for example, here in Hong Kong, since I'm American, I think you guys drive on the wrong side of the road. But if you come to America or somewhere else, then you have to drive on the other side. It's difficult unlearning things, but that's what we have to do because things are changing so quickly. So the Buddhists, I believe, call this a beginner's mind or beginner's mindset. In physics, it's called acting on first principles. So you take all the truth and you make a decision based on that. So just a little background. Zhang asked about my background. So this is me as a child growing up I grew up in Minnesota. And we're here on the church. We used to go to church all the time. And we grew up Catholic. And what you might find odd is I'm the only Asian guy there. And that is kind of odd if you think about it. But it's because I'm actually adopted. And it was back in the time, it was in the 70s, right after the war, the Vietnam War, or right before it ended. And these are letters from the orphanage where I was born, or where I was staying, and to my adopted parents. They're hard to read, but it's okay. And that's how we used to get answers, through mail. It would take a long time to get these answers. But that's how we also made connections. And I think in the age of electronics and digital, we tend to forget what that means to have a connection with someone because it's so easy to dismiss a different viewpoint or so easy just to filter something out. Another example is the elections. I think a lot of us actually don't have any affinity or any direct connection to any of those people that voted for Trump. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I do. And it's interesting and very important that we understand why they voted this way instead of just reading the press. So this is the last letter, and you can see it's signed by Sister Bernadette. She was a nun. So growing up in Minnesota, this is Bob Dylan, in the 70s, you can imagine if most of you are a lot younger, I guess, but if you can imagine in the 70s, that time was really about the war and the Vietnam War and how they lost. And when I went to Vietnam, they actually call it the American War, not the Vietnam War. So it's a different perspective. So all the things I knew about Vietnam was through media. So it was through Bob Dylan, it was through movies, pop culture was big, The Doors. It was through TV shows. I mean, this was in Vietnam, this was about Korean War, but pop culture is very influential. And I think, on a side note, I think that's what America is really great at, is pop culture. And it's kind of subversive, but that's why when you go to Sweden or other countries, that's why they're so good at English, because they watch all the American media. And they all speak like Americans. But that's a different story. So that was my first question. My first question is basically, where am I from and what is it really like there? And I never really had the chance to get there. And then the second question that I asked myself at one point was, this is a friend of mine, his name is David, and we studied together in Wisconsin. And he had just gotten back from an exchange in Germany. And he asked me, we're in a class called packaging. I study design, and you have to design packages, something like boxes and stuff. And he asked me, he was really excited about Germany. And this was like around 1992. And he asked, yeah, so are you interested in going? I'm like, no, I would never go to Germany. Just because, what should I do in Germany? I mean, it's just, when I studied a language, it's Spanish, because I was in America. You don't think of Germany that much. But anyways, I did end up going to Germany. We worked together. In one agency, we quit. We started our own agency, and we were quite successful. So I think the point there is you always have to be changing your viewpoints and always kind of asking, what is the status quo? Why are you making decisions? Or what are they based on? And then changing them and trying something new, because you make different connections. So eventually I did get to Vietnam. This was in 1998. And the reason I got there was not because of the US, it was because I had moved to Germany. And Germany, a lot of my friends had been to Vietnam as a vacation. And for me, growing up in the US, it's just not a place, you know, you don't go to Vietnam for a vacation. You go to like Mexico or Mexico, basically. But you don't go to Vietnam. So that's the whole point. I think it's really important that we, as people, reach back into what it's like being children again and start asking questions, because that's what's going to move us forward. So I would just want to bring it back to this last slide, second to last slide. And what's interesting here, these notes, you know, I didn't go to Vietnam searching for my birth parents or whatever. I just wanted to go check it out and stuff. But what was interesting here, the lady, the sister that wrote these notes, she was actually in Singapore. And I had my ex-girlfriend also lived in Singapore, so I visited her. So I actually got to meet the lady that wrote this. I mean, she was an old lady, actually, and she passed away at some point, I guess. But, and that's what I mean. If you don't try things out ever, something new, you're never going to come up with anything new. And I think that's really important. So number one, always ask questions. And number two, always challenge the status quo and ask, why are you doing this? And I want to leave you with this last thought, because I think it's extremely important. You might not always get the answers. And in an age when we can always get the answers, it's easy just to expect an answer. But I think the hard things are the questions. And I think that's what we have to ask ourselves. What is the question? Thank you very much.